Hello everybody, it's John Owens here from the Badass Academy on one of our expert interviews, and I have with me today, all the way from Quebec in Canada, Axel Troike, and Axel is an expert on all things data and is talking to us today on all things to do with GDPR compliance. Good morning, Axel. How are you?
Good morning, John. Not too bad, not too bad. What about yourself?
I'm good. Mind you, it's afternoon. It's morning here for us in New Zealand, but it's afternoon on the day before in Canada. So
yeah. Hopefully, it's not a disadvantage to be the yesterday person.
No, this is it. We're definitely talking across time and tide. Yeah. Now, Axel, let me tell you a bit about Axel. Axel is the president and chief executive of Grandite, based in Quebec, which specializes, as I say, in all things data, including data quality, data governance, master data management, and GDPR. Now, Axel has got extensive international experience stretching across Europe and North America, working with the most senior executives in both private and state enterprises, which makes him well placed to be able to guide businesses on implementing pragmatic solutions to GDPR compliance. So hopefully, Axel, that it's a quick summary, but I hope it sums up adequately your experience.
Yeah, it for sure it summarizes well my personal experience as well as what we can offer with our company Grandite, which I'm in charge of.
Excellent, and we'll come back to, because Grandite has got some great approaches and tools there, and we'll come back to those and make sure I do at the end of the interview, because I think it's definitely worthwhile our audience know all about that. Now, today we're talking about something that Axel's done, looking at GDPR compliance, which lots of people around the world will never have heard of. Lots of people around the world will have heard of, and lots of people around the world will be panicking like mad. But Axel, Axel has realized there's a real need, especially for, no, let me talk to Axel about the motivation as opposed to explaining it for him. That was my first question. So instead of answering it on your behalf, why don't I ask you, what was the motivation behind creating your slimmed down approach to GDPR?
Well, there are always three major issues that you have when it comes to respond to any regulation that is related to the processing of data. So the first issue is that laws are usually not written in a language that can be easily understood by non-legal people, or people that don't have any legal education. So the second issue with laws is that they are not structured in the way that it corresponds to typical steps that you have in IT projects. And third, last but not least, the law may contain a lot of obligation and constraints, and it's here definitely the case with the GDPR as well, that may not apply to all organizations. So what we have done here, based on our experience, we have created a consolidated questionnaire that covers the important requirements that all businesses need to answer. So to have a kind of extract that applies to 95–98% of the organizations, and treat all the special cases separately. So the idea that we had in mind was especially to serve small businesses with this approach. But actually this strategy, this approach can be applied to businesses of any size. We just want to make it simple, simple for everyone to get into this topic. So we elaborated this questionnaire in a way that we will be happy to provide this to interested parties. So just get in touch with me, and I will be glad to provide this catalog of questions free of charge and without any further obligation.
Lovely. No, thanks, Axel. Now, it's intended for small businesses primarily. So can you summarize sort of who, typically who these small businesses would be?
Well, maybe first of all, to give a kind of definition, certainly small business is related to some indications that are in the law itself, yeah, because some provisions apply and some do not. So going through all the provisions, my definitions would be to say a small business is an organization where less than 10 employees are involved in processing personal data. So just to be clear here, when we talk about processing personal data, certainly for some people in the audience, the first association may be, okay, this is about the size of the IT department. So processing personal data is something that applies to everyone that has a keyboard and a screen in front of himself or herself. Yeah, and
good point.
There's maybe someone at a reception desk that just takes a phone call and the name and the phone number of a person. This can be someone in order processing that takes an order and of course has to know where to deliver. And it can be someone in the accounting that just figured out, I guess there's an unpaid invoice, so maybe we have to send a reminder, and to do so, well, they will need the personal data of the recipient.
Excellent. But if there's less than, so we're looking at people where there is less than 10 of those type of people,
yeah.
people in positions who would handle personal data.
Yeah, so for those organizations, for the small businesses in that sense, I would see primarily three advantages. One is that they can document the processing of their personal data along the lines of the questionnaire in a free or in a tabular format, just using Office applications, yeah, to make it size appropriate. For other businesses, I have to strongly recommend to employ a professional data and process modeling tool under our guidance while following the questionnaire. So, but again, for small businesses, we don't have to take too drastic measures here. So those applications that usually everyone has at hand, Excel, Word, will do the job for those small organizations. Second advantage for them will be that this, as I already mentioned before, the questionnaire covers already most likely all of the questions that they have to look at, yeah, all the criteria that are important to them. So we don't have to look, or they don't have to look at a special area. And the third advantage is certainly that we believe that they don't need a consultant or a lawyer at their side to complete this very first step. Just to mention this here in this context, of course, the questionnaire covers the first step. What is the status quo? What are we doing in processing personal data in our organization? What we offer for small businesses as well as for businesses of any size, to complete the steps after that, to help them doing this. And of course, the typical steps after documenting the status quo is to say, okay, are there, sorry, are there any additional special questions? Are there special categories of processing that have to be covered? So is this the 1 or 2% of organizations that are not covered by the questionnaire? In another step, then to assess the risks, yeah, that can be identified in comparing the law, the provisions of the law, with what is actually done in terms of data protection at this point in the organization. And of course, what will be the measures, what will be the steps recommended to mitigate those risks, the gaps that exist between the law and the status quo of processing.
Okay, no, thank you. But you've answered my next question through all of that,
Oh, okay.
which was no problem. No, that's good. So basically, the step one is to actually write down what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Exactly, exactly.
But in doing that, you may actually be writing down and finding out that if you keep doing what you're doing, in fact, you will not be compliant. But having written it down and it's now clear, it's easier to actually make yourself compliant.
Exactly. So that will be the basis then to have a professional advice in the second step, third step, because most of the organizations, they will not be able to judge by themselves if based on what they documented that they are really GDPR compliant. Because I see a lot of self-assessment tools and dialogues out there that are offered to people. And when I look at those questions, they are not specific enough. And there will be the tendency for many people that go through these self-assessments to say, oh yeah, of course I do that. Of course I do that. Oh, okay, I'm compliant. But actually it's not that easy. As we always say, the devil is in the detail. But this first step with the questionnaire helps to bring down, to document all those details so that there's a solid basis to judge about the compliance or non-compliance of the status quo.
Okay, no, thanks, Axel. Now, does the person, the individual identified in the personal data, have to be a European Union national or officially residing in the European Union, country of the European Union, or are they just located there?
Yeah, this is probably the most crucial and probably most complex question, actually. So if we look at the law makes it simple. The law has a quite general provision here and says you only have to be there. So there's no requirement to be citizen or to be even resident. You just have to be there. So it doesn't make any difference actually whether you you live there permanently or you are in vacation or you just touch down on an airport in the European Union for a connection flight to leave the European Union in the next moment. Yeah, so it doesn't make any difference from the perspective of the law, but for sure there are some. There will be, like with each and every law or regulation, it will be measured compared with the reality, and assuming that courts or judges will have to deal with cases like that in the future, they will have to make a projection on the reality, and for sure just being there will not be enough. But maybe we can talk a bit later about some examples or some special situations which I will use to make this a bit more clear how this in practice the law will most likely be applied.
Okay, no, that's fine, because we have some questions coming up from our members on that. We may as well start on those now. The first one, it says, I operate an online store that sells products over the internet. If our buyer is from within the EU, then do I need to take notice of GDPR?
Yeah, so there's a clear yes. A natural person that is the client, or in a B2B business that will represent the client as a contact person and is located in Europe, is definitely under the protection of the GDPR.
Yeah. So go there. You in there you used in a B2B. Explain what you mean B2B.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah. So of course, a client can be by him or herself a natural person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if this natural person is located in the European Union, the law applies. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the client can also be a business. So in that case, nevertheless, the seller will talk to a natural person that represents that business, and will need the personal data of this
excellent.
person. Yeah. So if you talk to someone, you will need to have the name, the email address, the phone number, whatever the way of communication will be. But that is already enough to trigger the application of the law.
Excellent point. Thank you for that. Right. Another question is, I often write articles and give these away as free downloads when a person signs up online by giving me the name and email address. If the person who signs up is from within the EU, then do I need to be aware and apply and comply with GDPR?
Yeah, this is in the sense that was already, let's say, indicated by previous questions and answers. This is an excellent question, and the way you phrased it, certainly the answer is yes. You have to be compliant. Yeah?
Okay.
But the crucial point here is, John, how do you know if the person is from within the EU if you only have the name and the email address, which, as you just indicated, is sufficient to receive the download? Yeah? So there's actually a conflict point that the law has not taken care of, because if you without this information, you cannot treat the case properly. Yeah, if you just have the name and the email address, you don't know, well, what should I do with that? Do they fall into the category of European, let's say, residents or people in Europe, so the law will apply, or are they outside? But if you ask for this information, then you will violate the minimalization principle of the GDPR, which says don't collect more data than necessary. And to have a download, you don't need to know where the person physically is located. Yeah? So, as I said, there's no provision and no recital, no explanation in the law for that case. So from the practical situation, I have to clearly recommend treat every download request as if the person is within the EU, regardless what the person is.
Excellent. No, you definitely will violate.
If I may add, John, which I would recommend anyway, in that sense, that other countries will earlier or later also come up with similar privacy laws. So at some point we can assume the world will be covered by regional privacy laws, so that anyway there is no, the law applies, the law does not apply. It may be just a question of details of regional laws, but the way by experience, when I studied this law, I clearly have to say the GDPR will set the bar for privacy law. So in a simple conclusion, follow this law and you will be compliant with many other privacy laws that could come up.
Excellent, excellent. Now, the next question, I run online events such as webinars, masterclasses, etc. If the delegates are from within the EU, again, do I need to be compliant? I think you've probably answered that one already. It sounds like the answer to that one is yes.
It is a bit like the previous question, or maybe it's similar than that to that. So again, if the access to the webinar is free of charge, then there's no need to collect more than the name and the email address. However, if the access is payable, you will need to provide an invoice. And to provide a legally proper invoice, you will need to know the location of the person, because depending on the location of the person, you may need to charge sales tax or not. Yeah? So usually it's everywhere on the world, it's about the same. If the person is from your own region, you have to charge sales tax. If it's outside of your region, it does not apply. Yeah? So in any event, to be on the safe side in that moment where you have to provide an invoice, you have to know anyway the address of the person.
Excellent. No, I'm glad you clarified that. About the charging and the not charging, of course, that makes a difference to the data. Excellent point, Axel. I run an event company in Australia. We have people who attend from all around the world. If someone attends one of our events in Australia, but they live in the EU, does my company need to be compliant?
Yeah, again, a clear yes. Because in this case, you need to ask for the address of the person, as I said before, to provide the proper invoice. So you need the address for that reason. But you could even argue in a slightly different way and say, well, that's, as a business, this is my legitimate interest, which is one of the let's say provisions that the GDPR has to allow businesses to store to collect and store data or not. And I would apply here also legitimate interest. For example, you may want to disclose to your audience or to the attendees of the of this event just a statistical summary to say, and by the way, 20% of the attendees of this event are from Europe, or from any other continent or country, or to just to show how international your event is, for example.
Yes. Oh, good. You've added so many different facets and expanded on it that I even reading through these questions beforehand as they came in, I didn't grasp. Thanks for that, Axel. It's really good. Now, here we have. We operate a travel company that helps students, etc., from New Zealand to travel to Europe for holidays and exchange visits. Now, they're all New Zealand citizens. So does our company need to be GDPR compliant, as we're in New Zealand and we're only holding New Zealand citizens?
Well, in this case, if the business organizes trips to the EU, then of course it will process personal data of contact persons in Europe. So these may be representatives of your business in Europe, so that are in Europe to be reachable in their time zone in shorter distance for whatever purpose. But also this may include contact persons at guest families, since you mentioned exchange visits for students. So you may have those guest family data, personal data of those people and whom to contact there. And so clearly, yes, as a travel company helping students for these for trips or for exchange visits, this company has to be GDPR compliant.
But does that compliance apply to the information of the New Zealand students who are traveling over? Does it now, as soon as they land in the EU, does the GDPR compliance now kick in on that?
You're completely right, John. That's the other aspect. Exactly in that moment where the students from New Zealand they land in Europe, they are there. As we said before, for the law to apply, it's only important to be there. So in that moment where they are there, the law applies to them and they are under the protection of the law. So they can claim the protection that the law offers. But of course, the question is I would say, to compare this with the real situation, it needs to be important, or needs to be, I would see as a criterion, I would see, is the center of daily life transported to Europe? Yeah, that's what I would see as the practical case or practical criterion to decide the law applies or not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Formally, the law applies. Yeah. But again, the question is, how do you prove you have been there? Yeah.
Okay. As opposed to just passing through. Yeah.
Yeah. Because now the next case can be that these New Zealand students, yeah, they are in contact with a third party, whatever, a supplier that they have at home. Yeah, they say, well, send me my. I have to order something. I am for a certain period in Europe, and I need whatever, a new headset for my iPhone. Send me that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that case, of course, this third party, this supplier, has to be GDPR compliant, because the person that they serve is in Europe, yeah, is in the European Union, yeah.
Ah,
so,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So
yeah.
there are several aspects, yeah. So it's not only the aspect of who is organizing the trip, and in that case, sending people to Europe, or give them the chance to travel to Europe, but it's also, once they are there, that they can live their daily life, which they usually do when they are on an exchange visit. And at that moment, they interact with the world as if they are European residents.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I suppose also, when you're talking about that, I mean, if you take backpackers, although they're sort of nomadic and, on the move,
Yeah.
you could argue, I mean, the center of their daily life for the period, where they're backpacking around Europe, is well and truly transferred to Europe.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
okay.
and I believe that this will be, if ever any legal cases are brought up that are in dispute, I think this will be the kind of differentiation, or the criteria that a judge will apply, by saying, well, first of all, what is the evidence that the person was actually in the European Union? Yeah. And the second question that, let's say, I would ask as a judge is, what is the evidence for the supplier, yeah, or for the business to know that? Yeah. If you cannot know that, probably the case will not be decided in favor of the student, or the private, the natural person that is claiming its rights. Yeah. So, but at this point, let me say, John, certainly I'm not a lawyer. Yeah. And therefore, what I'm talking about here is not legal advice. What I'm doing is, I apply the law to the best of my knowledge and experience, and I have some experience with that from the past, because I translated legal requirements from the time where I was a consultant in Germany to audit guidelines for the general auditor in Germany. So I have a kind of let's say official experience in that sense. Yeah. But just to be careful at this point, this is my practical advice. I strongly have to advise businesses that want to pick up these cases, or that are in need to be GDPR compliant. The latest at the end, get the official seal of your legal counsel for that.
Okay, no, good point, Axel. Yeah, no, but I mean, good practical common sense advice is a great starting point. And as you said, if you need, then get the official legal seal of approval. But it's a lot easier to get if you've applied this common sense. That's really good. Axel, that's been fantastic. You've definitely brought aspects into that and really good pragmatic ways of looking at that I hadn't thought about. And thank you for that. Now, how can people get hold of you if they want to find out more about your sort of this slim down, really quick guide, which is so small but very powerful, or any of your other added value GDPR services?
Yeah, yeah. So the simplest way is drop me an email at info@grandite.com. Yeah. So Grandite
Right.
is spelled Golf, Romeo, Alpha, November, Delta, India, Tango, Echo, Grandite. So info@grandite.com. And if you are interested in this questionnaire, then please just mention interview with John Owens or questionnaire for GDPR compliance. So if these keywords are contained in this email, then it will certainly reach me, and I will be more than happy to respond.
Excellent. Well, what we'll do, we'll put that at the end of this interview. If anybody is looking at the recording, I'll put your contact information at the end, so they can definitely know how to get in touch with you. And we'll also, from the Badass Academy, we will have a page where people can go and register. And again, all we need is their first name and email to make ourselves compliant, and we will send this automatically out to them. So if anybody fills in their name, address, and that. So and that's been now. What? Just another quick question. This is Pam, my business partner here in Badass, was asking me what as a matter of interest, what do you offer larger companies? What does Grandite offer larger companies with regard to GDPR?
Well, as I initially already indicated, basically it is the same approach. Yeah. So this questionnaire was made with small businesses in mind, but while doing it, we figured out that, well, actually this is a good start for any organization of any size and branch. Yeah. So for the start, that is the same, but after that, for larger organizations, it is recommended, of course, as I said, to apply a professional data modeling and process modeling tool to document the status quo. Yeah, the information is too complex in any organization that exceeds these famous 10 people per organization in processing of personal data. So as soon as that is transcended, exceeded, in that case, you need a tool for that. It's getting too complex, and yeah, as they always say in home improvement programs, don't try that at home. Yeah, so if you are a larger organization, then please use professional guidance and professional tools to document the status. And of course, as I also mentioned, we are there to especially accompany larger organizations for the following steps. So to analyze the risks that they may have, to close the gaps, and recommend the steps that are necessary to mitigate those risks.
Wonderful. No, thank you for that. And we'll definitely post your contact details up there, because people viewing this will be come from both large and small. And it's great to see that your approach, because it applies to both, is going to be continuous, you know, that it's not entirely different for both of these things. That gives a great continuity. So thank you, Axel, for that. And I started off with my questions thinking, oh, these are pretty complete, but your answers were amazing. I'm glad you added so much value and so much flesh onto the bare skeleton of these questions. That was really helpful. So thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and of course for this opportunity to speak about the GDPR. And I hope that the audience can profit from my advice, and I will be glad if people are interested to contact me.
We definitely will do, and we'll have Axel back because we'll be doing lots of other things leading up to GDPR. And Axel has kindly volunteered his expertise and his time to take part in some of those. And I'll tell everybody in the academy as they're coming up, and we'll probably need to tell Axel as well because he wants to be there. So we will do that. Axel, once again, thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye for now.
My pleasure. Bye-bye. Bye-bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.